My next guest is the CEO of BT Fight Promotions, who is now linked up with Spectation Sports, and they got an event coming up here this Saturday, BTC 28, Battle at the Border. Doesn't get much better than this. Happy to be joined by Shari Carruthers here on the program. Shari, how are you?
Wonderful, James. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and thanks for being here. Obviously, big partnership here. I'm Canadian. I'm really excited about you guys being with Spectation Sports. Tell me how this all came together with you linking up with one of the biggest streaming platforms in the MMA industry.
Well, it's something we've been looking for a long time. You know, we want to give our athletes the most exposure we can possibly, we possibly can. That's always been our goal. You know, Spectation reached out to our media manager, and yeah, we've just had so a lot of conversations, just working through a lot of details, and I think it's a perfect fit for who we are and the direction we're going over the next few years.
And for those who might not be familiar with BTC, I know your promotion quite well. I was at the very first event way back in 2017.
Yes,
we've seen a lot of fighters evolve and go to the UFC. You know, one of the ones I always remember was Kyle Nelson. Got that really good win over Kama Worthy on one of your cards a number of years ago. A lot of history there. How has it been since the inception, you know, early on to where it is now? Because I know you guys have really been pushing a lot of fighters towards the UFC.
That's always been our goal, James. You know, I think our goal from day one was to give, Ontario fighters specifically a platform, but Canadian fighters. You know, I've come over the years to gain a lot of knowledge, and we have so much incredible talent here in this country and in this province, and a lot of times they get overlooked. And this is where Spectation comes in. This is something that we really, we really needed for our promotion. But it's been a heck of a journey. You know, Kyle Nelson was at BTC 1. He was our first fighter that ever moved on to a higher platform. Mm-hmm. You know, we've had some ups and downs, but I think we have a great team, and our goal has remained the same. You know, to travel across the province, or in COVID, we traveled across the country to keep as many of our fighters as active as possible.
Excellent. Yeah, it's great. And obviously a big one coming up here on Saturday, Battle of the Border. I mentioned it there. An all amateur card. I know amateur MMA has been a tough sticking point with just it getting legalized. And obviously it had a number of years ago. But how important is a card like this? And what's been the feedback? Because, there isn't a lot of amateur MMA going on as it is already.
Well, I was very fortunate, James, to be named through through Sports Canada and the commission to be a part of the comeback committee that was had a hand in bringing amateur back. And we knew as a promotion that our longevity wasn't going to exist if we couldn't create an amateur platform. We were essentially going to run out of fighters if we were going to grow Ontario and Canadian fighters. So as of January 1st, amateur came back. March 15th, we held the first ever in the province amateur fights in Belleville, Ontario. We held the first ever Pro-Am card in Belleville, Ontario. And May 3rd, with Spectation Sports, we're going to hold the first ever all amateur card in the province of Ontario. So we're going to make history this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting here. And, I sort of talked about it there. I'm sure a lot of fighters looking to take advantage of this opportunity because I know it's tough to get fights. What's been the response since you announced the card, and what can people expect this Saturday as far as some of the matchups?
So the matchups are going to be great. So we try, especially on our amateur cards, to have a mixture of both. Some fighters that are a little more experienced, that perhaps, the top end of the card that are maybe just, a couple or three fights away from turning pro. But, we're also, mindful of the fact that we need those novice fighters as well. We have to take the time to grow them. So, our matchmaker, Woodrow James, he works really hard at, trying to have a mixture of both. So the bottom half of the card, the first 5-6 fights are going to be novice, so very little experience. Some of them may be the first time they've stepped inside the cage to compete. And then the top half of the card will definitely be a little more exciting and some fellows that have a little more experience.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Is there plans to do all amateur cards going forward? Or I know you always sort of mix it in your events as well with some of the amateur fights. What's sort of the future of amateur MMA with BTC?
So once we got through just before our March card, we decided that we really, because, like you had mentioned, not everybody has picked up the ball and started to run with amateur, and we need it for the pro portion. So we decided we were going to commit to a show in some form or another every month up to and including November. So, we're going to have an all amateur card this May. June 7th here in Burlington, we'll have another Pro-Am card. July in Mississauga will be an all amateur card. August in Oshawa will be all amateur. September, Niagara Falls is going to be Pro-Am. October, probably in the Belleville area, will be all amateur. And then we're going to close out our year in November in London, which will be our final Pro-Am card for the year.
Excellent. That's great. And as far as this weekend's card, any names to keep an eye out for those who might be wondering? Again, we're literally watching the future of MMA this weekend with the BTC card. I know it's hard to pick maybe one or two, but anyone in particular really stand out to you on this card?
Yeah, the co-main and main event. So, like Craig McDonald's going to be a fantastic fighter. And I think that's a fight that, if you have a ticket or if you're watching it live on Spectation Sports, you'd be a fool not to stay and hang on for the co-main and main event.
There we go. Great endorsement there. And you sort of referenced it there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
And I do want to mention too that, female fights in the province are really hard to find, and we work really hard at that. And, so one of our novice fights is going to be a female fight, and, that's always something interesting to be a part of. So we should pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, and that's great news. I hear that all the time from female fighters, especially. I can't get fights, or there's no opportunities. So glad to see that that there's going to be a platform for them going forward. Something you kind of referenced earlier in this interview, you mentioned the number of events coming up. I think you have events almost every month leading up till November. What are some things we can look forward to as far as some of the fights that might get put together? I know you probably have the locations and the venues booked. Is there any fights that we can expect coming up here in the next little bit that you can tell us here?
Well, I think, especially the June 7th card, our home card, is always, very interesting. There's definitely going to be a belt. You're going to see a female fight for a title. You're going to see the likes of Adam Asenza, probably, his hometown. He's going to be headlining, and Clay Pye is such an interesting and exciting fighter. He just never disappoints every time. He'll end up being our co-main event. A lot of local fighters here in from our gym, Burlington Training Center, we've started getting a lot of love. You're going to see our boxing coach make his AMI debut, Nathan Centaur. We've Nate Mason, who's also another one of our coaches. He's going to turn from amateur. He's going to make his pro debut in June. So, I'm excited about any of our fights. But, our hometown, Central Arena, and I know you've been there before, I think too, James, I just find Central Arena just has old bones, and it just brings such an excitement there.
Yeah, it does. It's a great arena if you haven't checked it out. Quickly, your broadcasting team. I got to mention this. Jason Hagholm's a good friend of mine, so I gotta mention him in this interview. Does a great job with the fighters and the commentary there. How important is it with your promotion to have a strong commentary team? I know Josh Hill does stuff as well. What's sort of the outlook on that fans can expect on Saturday?
Yeah, I think with the team of Jason and Josh, Jason especially, he is just so invested in this sport, and he just gets so excited. And I think if you're watching it from home, and with a combination of Josh is just so intelligent about the sport, but with a combination of the two of them, they just pull you in, lock you in, and you're not going to leave.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a lot of great action coming up here live on Spectation Sports. BTC 28, Battle of the Border. You can't miss it. Shari, thanks for doing this. I'm sure we're going to be doing this again at some point too. Really excited about this. Anything you want to mention before we get out of here? Tickets. And again, I want to remind everyone, spectationsports.com is your home to watch this. So make sure you're glued to that. But anything you want to say, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, absolutely. So tickets for any of our events you can pick up on btcfight.ca, as well as the link to watch it live with Spectation Sports. And I think it's just really important for anybody that's listening that, support your local athlete, their time and their dedication and what they put into the sport, come out and show them that you appreciate the work that they're putting into this.